to this event that I pulled together. Change the playbook, change the game. My name is David Lee. For those of you that don't know me, and today is really meant to be an open discussion, right? I really did not want this to be any kind of presentation or event or for anybody to think that I'm standing on this hill preaching everybody about what needs to be done. It really is just an open discussion about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Let me not have the actual YouTube channel we're streaming to up on the other computer because that makes it really distracting. So I have a special guest with me today, Ms. Janae Johnson.
Hey,
everybody say hello. And I'm gonna just give you guys, everybody, some background on how this thing even came together, right? Because this is so crazy. And this is what I love about the world that we're in today and why I'm really passionate about like this topic and the things that we can do. So this thing whole started because if you haven't been familiar with it, the Wells Fargo CEO put his foot in his mouth and made a statement about how he felt like there wasn't a lot of talent, there wasn't a lot of diverse talent, right? That's why they weren't able to fill certain roles. There's just not a lot of talent out there. As we should have, we murdered this dude on Twitter and also on the social medias, right? He just got all kind of backlash, came back, retracted the statement or tried to retract the statement saying that it was unconscious bias, right? So look, that led me to kind of just post this kind of message about, at the end of the day, when somebody shows you who they are, like believe them, and that we need to dispel this myth that there's not a lot of talent out there, because that literally is a myth. Like there's tons of diverse talent out there, be it women, be it minorities, like it's everywhere. You just have to go and look. So if you can't find it, you're not really looking. And so then that led me to kind of put together this event. And so then I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I found Ms. Janae Johnson's post that she did. And I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to send her a LinkedIn message and ask if she wants to come to my event to have this discussion. Sure enough, she said, yes, here we are. And like this all happened within the course of a couple of days.
It was quick.
Right. And so if anything, like I say all that to say, like, these are things that we can solve, people. It just takes effort. Like you just have to be willing to want to put in the effort to kind of solve these problems. I come from the world of tech. Like this is what we do all day, every day. We look at problems and go, okay, how can we solve this one? Right? Nothing's impossible for us. So
right.
Happy to have everybody that's joining in. Feel free, if you're joining on YouTube or Twitter, you can chat with us. You can leave in the comments if you actually want to join us on the stream. Chat with us and let us know. I will send you the link. You can hop in on us and discuss it. Again, this is an open discussion. We're here to talk about this. We want to know, we want to focus on like actionable steps. Like what do we want out of diversity and inclusion, and how can we start taking steps forward? So with that, I'm gonna kind of shut up a little bit and I'm gonna let Janae get some words in because I tend to rant.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody, wherever you're joining from and whatever time of day you're watching this, because I'm clear that we'll have some replay viewers. Okay. So definitely want to welcome you to the broadcast. David, I want to thank you for reaching out because, listen, I could talk about this all day. Like I could clear my whole afternoon and just post up and talk about this, and not just talk about it from a standpoint of, this is just a really bad thing in terms of whether it's the CEO statement from Wells Fargo, which we know is the sentiment of not just him, but also some of his peers, both in the financial industry as well as other CEOs, probably in other industries, right? He just wasn't, I don't know who's on his team. I don't know who didn't filter him correctly, right. Or who let, I don't know who let this dude just kind of say whatever. But his sentiment, he said what he meant. And he also said probably what has been said behind closed doors for years, for decades, right? Yeah. As an excuse as to why companies have not really taken diversity and inclusion very seriously, or they've treated it as a check the box exercise.
Right.
So I love to just look at what can we actually do, and they about, hey, we need to get clear on what we're actually asking for.
Yeah.
Because when we think about diversity, we think about the eye test of diversity first, right? Like if I go to your website, like I did for Wells Fargo, because clearly they had no shame, and I had to go look at their executive committee, and I found one Black dude, and he just got there because he was at BNY Mellon until April of 2020. So let's say he rolled out from there, had a little transition time. So boom, maybe he started there in June.
Right.
Interesting. So my thing is, you clearly didn't have any diversity with your immediate direct reports. Mm-hmm. Not to mention that if you look at, I'm picking on Wells Fargo, but it could be any company. Right. You look inside of the organization, you have all of these talented Black people in your organization that possibly you haven't developed or you haven't promoted. And
Yep.
then externally, there are organizations like the Executive Leadership Council that's all they do is
Right.
develop Black talent to be in managerial and leadership roles in corporate. Like that is their whole thing. And then you have all of these consultants. I mean, there's resources everywhere. So before the broadcast started, David and I we were talking about how you don't even have to legit be a deep researcher,
Yeah.
an expert. You got Google, people. Like all you really have to do is pick up your phone and like Google, and then you can find all kinds of resources and
Yep.
answers to the issue. So I think that's a part of the frustration. But I'm glad that we're getting together to not just talk about what the problems are, but to get really clear about what we're asking
Yeah.
for and also what can be done. Because sometimes even the smartest people will miss the most obvious solution.
Right. And speaking of the Googles, right? So below, if you're watching the chat, there is, you see a link. I'm gonna kind of make it a little more obvious there. So I put together on that webpage there just some quick resources, right? So there's a quick infographic, but there's also a link. There's a button there to click to a link that goes to a Google spreadsheet that there's 11 entries on there. Literally took me 20 minutes to figure out some organizations that you can, if you're a company, if you're in HR, if you're in recruitment, that you can connect with, right? So we've got Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, the National Society of Black Engineers, also known as NSBE, which I know everybody from HBCU knows about NSBE because they love the party, but they also are the National Society of Black Engineers. The Tapia Conference, this one is near and dear to my heart. My cousin works a lot with the Tapia Conference. I attended this conference, I don't want to say how many years ago because it's going to make me feel old. But what I love about this conference, like you want to talk about feeling like you are seen. It is a conference about diversity put on by Richard Tapia, but it's for like supercomputing and mathematics. And so you will find students, doctorate students, right, who are studying in mathematics and physics and programming. I mean, just a rich talent worth of young, up and coming like superstars. I've met some really good friends at some of these conferences I've stayed connected with them to this day. Every time I talk about this conference, I shout out my boy Sid, who's gonna get embarrassed because when I met him, I was like, he will win the Nobel Peace Prize one day.
Wow.
This was the smartest dude out of, and he was so young when I met him, and he's still doing great things. So so shout out to the Tapia Conference, National Association of Black Accountants, National Association of Black Americans Human Resources, National Black MBA Association, and more. All these links are there on that Google spreadsheet. Guys, this took 15 minutes, if that, of Googling. And then I have all of this. So, getting down to one of the things that I would say I want to see is let's start getting a plan, with recruiting, right? So you say that the talent pool is not there, right? So how do we enrich your talent pool? Well, number one, like how many of these organizations are you connected to, or have you even talked to, right? If you're not aware of them, okay, right? I'm gonna be nice today and give you a slight, like it's 2020 and the internet is this, but it's okay. You don't know about them, so here you go. Now you know about them, right? What are you? Let's get some real metrics around. Hey, we are going to connect and pick 5 of these organizations and co-sponsor some events with these organizations in order to start to diversify our talent pool, right? And there's something that we can track and put in the books right then and there and say, okay, just like we do with everything else in business, right? Especially in sales and by quarters, we track goals. Like, hey, let's make sure we have established relationships with 5 professional organizations, either representing people of color or LGBTQ community, whatever it is. Let's establish 5 of those by X date. Boom, there it is.
So David, here's what I also want to add to that, because a client of mine, so I won't name their name because they are working on trying to get it together, okay. But they have an exhaustive list on their public-facing website of all of the organizations you named, plus probably another 20 to 30, right? Where they've thrown money at them. They have sponsored this event, they co-sponsored, they've been a title sponsor, they donate every year. They have these corporate partnerships in place. But what I found is that makes them look good, right? So it ends up being like, hey, look at all the things that we're doing around diversity. Look at all of these organizations that we're a part of. Look at all of our affinity groups that we support either internally or externally. But what I found working inside of the company is that their Black employees have a whole nother story. And on top of that, the connection that they have to these companies doesn't necessarily produce jobs. It produces photo ops, it produces nice stuff for the web, it produces marketing material, but it definitely, like, not in every case does it actually produce jobs. And so then for me, that begs the question of, well, why not? You're in close proximity to these organizations. How is it that the conversation never goes there about, hey, let's look at the talent that's actually coming in? Now, I do think that through networking, there are some who end up kind of going that way and they end up being hired. But I think even beyond looking at that list, the call to action for these companies is to have substantial relationships with these organizations that actually produce jobs and opportunities.
Right. So that, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an excellent point, right? So that would tell me we would want to take that initiative and further define it, right? So we don't get that, right? So it's like, okay, so don't just connect and get the photo ops. So I look at that almost like sourcing, right? So just like, and look, we put time, like so much time and effort into this on sales operations, right? Just like sourcing a deal, right? You're gonna jump in and pay attention to, okay, how much effort did we put over here? How much money did we spend? Where did the marketing come from? And so who are we sourcing with this deal that came in and allows to close? Okay, well, this is the same thing over here. You're gonna connect with this organization, and the money that you're spending, the things that you're doing should lead you should be talking about, okay, how can we do this to help us source candidates, right? And so we should then be tracking candidate flow from sourcing for that, right? I think the thing is, and this may, I'm gonna try and be fair, right? It may be a little bit unfair to maybe some of the HR, the recruitments, but it's like we need to up level how they're tracking some of these things, and maybe these aren't things that they're used to in HR. I don't know, right? So if we've got HR representatives, or an HR representative, tag them, have them come on his chat, right? Because we want to talk about it, want to have this discussion, right? But maybe it's when you look at these things, right, we got to get a little bit more defined on the metrics and how we're tracking it. And if we, to me, it comes down to sales, right? The last about 4 or 5 years of my career, I got a chance to really get closer to sales and see how they run it. And so it's even more disheartening to me when I hear stuff like this. I was like, because when it comes to selling a product, when I tell you, we know how long it took, who it came in at.
Yeah, all kinds of metrics.
Like, we have every single metric come through on how we go close this deal, right? So that shows me that we can track at this level. We can do that. We just need to apply it to these same type of things. To your earlier point, we got to get away from the check the box. Well, we did this and we did this. We threw a party, right? We have diversity inclusion training. We hand out stickers. We did. No, like,
you hand out stickers though. People put them on their cubicle and everything.
To hand out
stickers. You hand out stickers. It's funny, but it's not. I mean, it's not funny in the grand scheme of things. But the fact that you even said that helps me know that it's not just happening at some of the companies that's a thing, apparently.
No. And so, with that, we want to, I want to make sure that when we have these discussions, and, for those of you who are watching, when you go back and you have these discussions, right, separate the two events, right? That there's a difference between people wanting to hear about things and talk about change, right, which is good. But then back to like, okay, but what are we going to do affect the things here in this company? Here's what I mean by that. Doing diversity and inclusion training and making sure that everybody, is a human being and treats everybody the same, right? I'm not going to get into that, but, that's one thing. And I get that, right? But that's different from like, okay, but what are we doing to make sure that the people that we bring into this company are, number one, that they're open to come into this company, and what are we doing for the people that are here at this company? Not talking about, well, we should let's no longer say like whitelist or blacklist. Like, what are we talking about? Like, let's not start talking about words that we're going to change and like
the whole bedroom thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Where it's like all the realtors were saying, oh, we're not going to say master bedroom anymore because that's racist, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, that's not what we asked for though. Right. But cool.
Right. Like, and I will. I won't steal it. I'll quote, like, it was a tweet from John Legend. When I saw that, he was like, okay, that's cool. But how about we deal with the fact that Black people actually don't get taken out to go view the homes? That realtors will literally pass up on working with Black or minority families because they feel like they're already qualified because they're already prejudging, right? How about we solve that issue instead of calling it a master bedroom? Because I'm pretty sure they're going to get over calling it a master bedroom if they're able to close in their house. Like, I think they'll be okay. Be like, okay, we can deal with that part later. So again, same thing when we come to the workplace, right? There's a lot and there's a lot of emotions when it comes to this issue. But let's keep the main thing, and say, okay, but let's focus on like how do we increase the numbers of the people that we have here, and then how do we make sure that those people are, once they're here, like they actually stay. That's another big one.
I was going to say retention is a huge issue that we see a lot of. So even in another company that I worked with in the past, one of their executives essentially said, you know, I have made a point to have this partnership with Tuskegee Institute, and I've actually been hiring engineers from Tuskegee, and I, for whatever reason, cannot get them to stay. So, and he's had this partnership for like 10 years that he initiated, and this is a big like oil and gas major, but for some reason he's just like, nobody wants to stay. They'll stay for maybe 3 years and then they find somewhere else and they move on. So to me, obviously there's an issue with your culture, right, that is not inclusive, and he's aware of that, but it's also that example happens everywhere. And so the other challenge is that from the HR side, we see a lot of focus on talent acquisition. And so, like, how do we partner with HBCUs and maybe even some of these organizations to bring in new Black talent? Meanwhile, we haven't done what we need to do to develop the current Black talent, or to position them for success. Or even, you know, one of the things I talk about a lot is sponsorship, right? Like, in order to move around in corporate, a lot of times you need that someone who's going to prop the door open for you.
Right.
Or say, hey, there's this highly visible project. I think you'd be a great fit for it. I'm going to put you on that project because this is a strategic imperative for the organization. So it's going to give you all this visibility, right? And then from there, you move around. I mean, we've seen it happen with non-Black people in organizations all the time.
Right.
So there's also that part. I think there are a lot of companies that are doing well, or at least trying to do well on the acquisition side, not necessarily on the development and the retention and the sponsorship of those employees. But I wanted to offer a case study, David. Can I offer you, like, because listen, we can sit here all day. I could drag these companies, everybody who's doing wrong. Like, listen, that's like a whole week series. But I actually want to highlight an organization and a program that I was just a part of that I think is a really good model and represents real actionable change.
Okay.
So it was sponsored by Waste Management. It is called Share the Mic and the Money Now. It's a hashtag. Okay. So Share the Mic was a hashtag that where there were these influencers. So white influencers were partnering with Black influencers, right? And saying, hey, I want to give you access to my people, my platform, right, as a way to amplify Black voices, right? So that was a few months ago. So the Chief Human Resource Officer for Waste Management, she started this initiative with her team. She partnered with Leadership Houston, and I'm in Houston, Texas, by the way, for all of you. She partnered with Leadership Houston, which most major cities have some kind of leadership program, but Leadership Houston is 40 years, and they have a cohort of leaders that they select every single year. So she partnered with them, and she also partnered with the Greater Houston Black Chamber. And in 4 weeks, they stood up a program and executed a program that was for 40 Black women-owned businesses to close the supplier diversity gap. And they have a focus and a goal of achieving $40 million in contracts for the 40 Black women-owned businesses. And so what they did in 4 weeks, I have never seen. Like, it was crazy. But literally, they looked at their numbers. They said, our supplier spend for diverse suppliers is an embarrassment. We need to do better. Then not only did Waste Management sponsor it, but then they got their peers from other companies, from GE, from Baker Hughes, from Salesforce, from NASA, from all these other organizations, and selected 40 Black women-owned businesses, because mine was one of them, and we were able to pitch our services directly to the decision makers. So they immediately gave us access, and then not just access, they practiced for our pitches. They had us meet with procurement people to talk about how do you really do business in corporate. They continue even now, like we did our pitches, we had our letter of intent, all of that. Even now, we have development programs that Salesforce is taking us through, like free. They sponsored anyone who was not certified as a minority-owned certified business. They sponsored their certification and fast-tracked it. So these are like real. This is like a case study and I'm talking about 4 weeks they stood it up, and they executed it not flawlessly, but impactful
Right.
over
Right.
the course of maybe another 3 weeks. So they went from nothing to having this huge impact program over the course of 2 months.
That's that's amazing. Like,
Yeah,
what? Shout out Waste Management.
yeah,
Hello. Like, let's waste management marketing. If you're paying attention, let's put that out on the internet.
yeah,
Let's talk
yeah.
about that, because that, I mean, that is a perfect case study. That is exactly the type of things that I know that in this day and age we're capable of doing, right? And not even just hearing you talk about it, and like, first of all, the 4 weeks just blows my mind, right? Like, if you've ever run a project in anything ever in life, to get something done, right? Like, but what again? What does that show? That shows real intent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you can get something done when you want to. Like, we all know how it works, right? We all procrastinate. We all do that. Oh, I got this big project due. I'm gonna kind of get it done. Like, you know what I mean? Like, however everybody works, right? But it's like, when you really want to get something done, everybody has a thing of locking in. And so I think that, that shows, especially and Waste Management is not a small company. That's a big company.
They're huge.
Right?
They're huge. They're Fortune 200, 100, somewhere in there.
So, there's processes in place that had to go through, and all these things, whatever, right? And things that we could typically always use as excuses, like, well, I want to do it, but we got to do this. It's like, no, what it comes down to is, do we actually want to make something happen? And here, it's very clear in that organization, it was like, yes, we do. So let's go do it. And your point that you made, it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
Right? Like, look at what we have. So we just have to make impact and make it.
My mind is so blown by, it's not even just the letters of intent, because my company actually got we got 3 letters of intent from 3 large organizations that now they basically committed to do business with us. Right. They just want to figure out how. So we're in talks of, okay, well, where does this fit in our organization? And let me introduce you to some people, et cetera. But on top of that, we're also getting business coaching. We're getting business development coaching. I'm getting coaching from the marketing VP from Sodexo, who also Sodexo participated in this program too. And so now, for free, and this is someone I would not have access to, they're literally going to sit down and say, okay, let's look at how you're marketing your business. So obviously that's on the supplier diversity side. But when we look at diversity programs and organizations, you look at the workforce, you look at supplier diversity, you look at leadership representation, you look at the internal affinity groups and the employee resource groups. So this is one pillar of it, but it really displays, hey, we're committed, and we knew that this is something that we could do. And they worked long hours to put it together. I mean, that was everything from actually sourcing the 40 women, doing the application process. They hired a project manager to run everything. I know they lost a lot of sleep, right? But they got it done. And as a result, you have 40 women-owned businesses who are actually now positioned to do whatever it is they plan to do for the rest.
Right.
I think the other thing to relate it to, David, and this is what I've been talking about, think about what happened with COVID, right? When COVID hit, if a company needed PPE, and let's say their procurement process was usually 30 to 60 days, and we have to vet the supplier, and guess what? They had the PPE 2 days,
right,
3 days, 5 days, whatever, because they needed it. So they circumvented all of the foolishness to get what they wanted. So it is an example of, you think about all the changes that corporations have had to make as a result of COVID. This is definitely one of those things where you can look at it as an example, right? And use that to say, if you wanted to do this, if you saw the urgency, then you would.
And I think, to me, what I'm, as you're discussing this, right, what's hitting me is that what we need to start looking at this is that this is not a initiative like in your organization. Like, truly, this is a organization in itself, right? Because you're going to need, like, hey, I'm going to need project management. I'm going to need, like, I need to put together mentorship programs and do all that. Like, this takes people and time and effort. And I think too many times with this, we want to pull from, like, some companies have, like, their HR staff, which is doing all the stuff that they do for HR, right? But then it's like, oh, and do this. And so, but we need all these other people with other full-time jobs to kind of go in and do this. And so what happens with most people, right? Look, majority of people right today are either overworked, right? Or just kind of, stressed out. So it's like, okay, on top of all this, I may really care about wanting to do this, but you're trying to tell me that I got to, run this team and do this and then do this other thing, which I don't get paid for, but I'm willing to do. It's like, so you're going to get the efforts that you get, right? And so maybe it's time to start looking at these areas within HR and say, okay, we're truly going to be and have a diversity and inclusion program. Like it's actually going to be a department, and we're going to have to, efforts that we're going to go through. Because I think for coming back to the retention, I think one of the things is, right, that kind of that meant that internal mentorship and networking, right? Mm-hmm. And I won't speak for everybody. So this is where I would hope the people are watching, please engage and say how you feel about it. But I will say, I look back on my career and how I was at, like, whether or not I felt like I would stay with a company depended on whether or not, did I feel like, is this a place that, number one, that I could advance? And number two, that is going to help me grow and advance, right? Now, I've always been very, very much, and people that know me, probably people that's going to be watching this, I always had a plan for my career. Day one, I was the one walking in like, okay, this is what we're going to do. By 2 years, we're going to be here. By 3 years, we're going to be here. By five, but I've just always been like that. And I get that not everybody's like that. So therefore, I didn't need a whole lot of coaching and mentoring. I need to know, like, you got to tell me where there's a path, right? There's a path, I'm going to go climb it. I don't care if it's up a rock. I don't care if it's over a cliff. I'm going to go find the path, right? But that's great for people who are my personalities happen to have that. But for everybody else, you have to say, look, not only is there a path, I'm going to help you get there. Right. Yeah. And what I've seen, and I don't know if this is indicative of the tech space or whatnot, but what I have seen is that so many managers are either just trying to figure out, one, they're learning themselves and trying to get it together. The experienced ones feels like they just don't have the time, or they handpick the ones that, they just happen to vibe with, right? That happens to play golf, that happens to like this or that. And so what they end up doing is not even realizing they're establishing a relationship and mentoring, but not even doing it because that's what they're spending their time. Like that whole thing is important. And people see that from an organization. If they look around, and again, let me step back and not generalize it. If I'm there, if I look around and I feel like, look, I don't feel like I'm included in any of these things, or I don't know if I ever fit in. Like, I don't know if I want to become a manager because I don't know if I'll fit in with these other managers. Yeah, I'm good, right? I'm gonna go find a place where I feel like either I'm gonna just go look, I'm gonna go get some more money somewhere else. I'm gonna be like, you know what? I feel like I fit in with this group a little more, because as much as we try to separate like work and life and employees from regular people, like, look, you don't stop becoming a person when you go to work every day. Mm-mm. And so at the end of the day, is if there's a bunch of people that I just don't like and can't get, like, or I feel they exclude me from things, or I feel like, it's just not a group that I will have good interaction with, I'm just not going to be there.
Right.
So on the retention side, I think there is a lot that you have to look at when you put in these mentorship programs and say, okay, let's literally roll this out and give either managers room to mentor people, or bring on people that's what they do, help there to coach and develop, right? I think sometimes a lot of it is too much on the employee to be like, go become the best employee you can be, go figure it out, and when you're ready, we'll just reward you.
Right. So, which we know that even with that, you can be the best employee that you can be. You can go figure it out on your own, and that doesn't necessarily guarantee you an opportunity, right? Depending on the makeup of the culture. So I think my question to you, David, and really, I guess for the audience too, is like, what is our request and let's just focus, I guess, on the HR piece of it, right? So one of the things that I've seen in terms of companies that have been successful in really moving the needle around diversity and inclusion is that even if it is HR led, it is sponsored by another side of the business that actually makes money. Because if we think about the organizational structure, HR is a cost center. Yep. Like, and everyone that's in those support services, they're not necessarily making the company money.
Right.
And so when you have that HR leader or director of HR who's sponsoring the diversity efforts, their voice, their pull, and their ability to make decisions and control budgets is limited. And so it's almost like, for me, I want to see partnership with another part of the business. So don't tell me it's just your HR people and you all created this, director of diversity and inclusion who reports to the VP of HR, and the rest of the organization is segmented. So that would be my ask. So that's the first thing I want to see is partnership. But I wonder for you, like, what's your request, or what do you suggest happen for organizations who really say they're committed to this?
My first ask is like, I want clear, measurable, public initiatives, right, or objectives. Like, so if we're going to say, I think, and I should have looked it up before, and I could probably look it up right now, but I won't. But like Google recently re-announced, like, because they did it before, but they came back again and said, hey, by 2025, we're going to have whatever it is, whatever number they put out there. Like, okay, that's cool, right? But what I want to see with that is like, okay, and I don't necessarily expect companies to all share this publicly because I get it, but at least internally, like every employee who has a question about it should know, like, if this is our initiative, I want to see planned out, like, we want to go, if we say, I want to increase, Black employees by 30% by 2025, right? Boom, there's the goal. Then I want to see the initiatives. What are we doing in place to make sure that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are our checks that we're going to check for, like, every quarter, to make sure we're on track? And then what I really want to see is, what are our penalties if we don't hit it? Right now, what we see with a lot of this stuff is all this stuff, like, hey, we want to do this, great, but if we don't do it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because if I'm in sales and I don't meet a sales number, right? It's a problem, right? Like, so if your sales leader does not hit their numbers 2 quarters in a row, are they still your sales leader? Probably not. So if your initiatives around your HRD D&I leaders are not hitting their initiatives, why are they still there? And again, I'm not coming after you leaders. I'm not, but I'm saying, like, I want to see, we in all other parts of business, we lay out goals and objectives and we have consequences if we don't meet them. We need to have the same things over there. So what I want to see is clearly laid out objectives and initiatives, how we're going to meet them. And I want to see, consequences. Not saying that people got to get fired. I'm just saying, what are we going to do if we don't do this, right? There needs to be something there. Like, hey, well, maybe we should, we didn't meet this goal. Okay. Heck, maybe we don't do the pajama party or whatever, and we take that money to do something else. I don't know, right?
I get you. Right? Enforcement, because otherwise, if we, as human beings, this is how our brains are wired. So if there is no incentive and there is no penalty, or one of the two are missing, then it's going to be really difficult to actually do it. That's just with anything. I mean, listen, just who would actually work out? Probably a few people. But if we didn't think that there was some aesthetic benefit or health benefit to us, and if there wasn't like, hey, if I don't work out, then my blood pressure is going to stay high, so I should work out, right? That's the penalty. Then we wouldn't, right? And even with knowing, like, we think about this, even with knowing the benefits and also knowing the penalties, and I'm saying we, as in me, Janae, who struggled through 20 minutes of a workout today and starts and stops every other week, right? Like, we wouldn't do it. We still, even with knowing the benefits, so it's still difficult to change behaviors. And I think for me, I'm more concerned about how do you change people's behaviors, their habits, their mindsets, because if you can change that in the organization, then you'll no longer be relying on your annual diversity and unconscious bias training to try to move the needle and sort of change the organization. Like, because we know that that's not, training people about unconscious bias doesn't necessarily remove the unconscious bias. That's not what it does.
It just moves it to being conscious.
Right. And more importantly, I don't even talk about unconscious bias anymore, because I'm like, well, what about the conscious? What about, like, there's unconscious bias and then there's, microaggressions. I'm like, nah, let's talk about the conscious bias and macroaggressions.
Right.
Where straight up, you know exactly what you're doing and you know exactly what you're saying and you know what impact it has.
Right.
Anyway, let me not, because I feel a rant coming. I feel the rant coming, David. So I'm gonna try to reel it back in.
All right. Look, I get. Look, people that know me, that follow me, man. There's always that. I come with a rant warning. Just know, it's just like they will come at any given time.
Cool.
But you know what? One of the interesting things. So when I think about that, right? So, and maybe consequences in this aspect won't work. So maybe we do the other side, right? There's always, it's either the stick or the carrot. Maybe we go with the carrot. How about we throw in, let's do some bonuses, right? Let's do some actual initiatives to say, hey, look, we bring you in and we need to increase representation in this group by X%, right? And so maybe that goes in as a bonus into the salary pay. And again, I get it. This is coming out of a cost center, so it's harder to do when it's not revenue generating. But I think that goes back to the whole bigger thing is we've looked at this too long as just something that just like it's a bigger thing than what it needs to be. So that means it's going to cost money, right? Yeah. If you truly want to change something, you're going to have to invest into it. And, part of what I think sometimes we struggle in tech, specifically like cybersecurity, is showing the importance of something. We need to start to paint to like why this is important and how this will help you be in a more diverse company, how it will help you to be more competitive in your listings, where it help you maybe build better products, to deliver better services, right? Especially if you're a global company, right? I think this is like just too easy for a global company. It's like, look, if you operate across every aspect of this world, then yeah, wouldn't you want to be a much more diverse company so you can understand the markets that you're trying to enter? That makes you much more competitive, right? And obviously there's more things you can dig down into there, but I think we have to do a better job of putting that there so we can say, look, this is how this will affect your bottom line, right? I'd love to be able to say, look, increase Black employees by 30% and you make $50 million more. Great.
And the thing about it is, David, there's new data, recent data that's out there that provides the business case for diversity. So that it's not just about like, yes, we know it's the right thing to do, right? Got that. But we also know that companies and leaders and CEOs, they are driven by profit. So if you're able to show either A, how they can be more profitable, or how companies that are more diverse are then by default more profitable, or B, you can show them how by not focusing on inclusion and equity in the workplace, you have a higher risk exposure and there's a loss that you can take, right? Because we know that the lawsuits happen. We know that the brand damage happens, and then, you lose clients, you lose customers. Like if you can actually track that data. So I think I'll have to look it up. I should have looked it up before now. I think it's Citibank. They recently released a report like within the last month or so, that tracks to the dollar companies that have like, hey, they did this around diversity, and as a result, this is how much money they made or lost if they didn't do X, right? Like it's a very clear correlation.
Okay, that's awesome. We'll do this for everybody that's watching now, and maybe we'll watch this later. What I'll do is on that link there below the imdavidlee.com/resources, I'll get this from Janae and I'll post it there as a link so you can have access to it if you're a nerd like me and like to go look through data and facts, because
yeah.
Who doesn't like to deal in facts and truth nowadays? Anyway. So I want to kind of move to like the other part of this, which is, part of like the little infographic I put together where it was like just kind of navigating all of this at work, like navigating the diversity and inclusion conversations at work, right? There's, stuff from the HR side, the things from the administration side we could do to kind of make it better. I want to kind of have discussions now about, the people who have to live it right now every day, right? And, when you're going through this and realizing that, number one, it's not going to change tomorrow, right? Which I think we can say that, we get that, but it doesn't make it any easier where you have to go in and kind of have these uncomfortable conversations or feel like you're just, making these statements and nobody's listening, like how to get through this. And so, part of the things that I look at this and say, I look at my career and, in tech, especially in cybersecurity, for most of my career, it was ever only just me. Right. So, I just very early on had to get used to that, especially coming from an HBCU where I spending 4 years just seeing nothing but melanin.
Yeah.
And started my career and being like, ain't nobody here. Okay, this is how this is going to work. And, it's I think it depends on your temperament and how you are. Like for me, it was, I learned to roll with the, with the jokes that were kind of, halfway, like kind of at the line.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you don't know? Like for me, so my last name is Lee. People was like, oh, David Lee Roth. And I would tell people, I don't know who that is. And they would look at me like, what do you, of course you know who David's like, no, like I don't. No. Like, you know who Method Man is? Like, do you, I was like, so, I mean, I could talk to you about all the kind of favorite things that people that I know that you're not going to know. Like, and it's okay, the fact that you don't know them, things like that. So, one of the things I would, tell people and discuss is like, number one, most important, protect your mental space and protect your mental health, right?
Yeah.
Take a step back.
Mhm.
If you utilize your vacation policy, utilize all of that. Like, this is going to be, especially for us who are minorities, like this is a fight we've had our entire lives, right?
Mhm.
And we've got a lot of people coming into it that are just not being open to it. There's a lot of things that we're going up against, but at the end of the day, your mental space is so important. Protect that, right?
Mhm.
Go hard 2-3 days and then take a day off, right? Just step back. Remember, that the good things that you have going on in life, go out on a run or whatever, drink some wine, whatever you got to do, watch, whatever, Insecure, Lovecraft Country, I don't know, whatever it is that you do, right? We'll take a step back because that is important, right? I think sometimes, especially in the climate that we're in now, it's like we're just getting bombarded with like just everything. News and negative stuff is going on, and you're going to work and you're fighting. Sometimes you feel like you can never see the forest for the trees. So please make sure that you do that. Because you don't want to burn yourself out on this, right? And then you also don't want to set yourself up to be emotionally manipulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not careful and you're just going through this. Like, there's people out there who are going to be like, oh, they close. Let me just say this one little thing, push them over the edge. So.
Yeah, I would also add to that. So David, with my company, what we really have been focused on from a behavior change consulting standpoint is focusing on workplace equity, because we believe that if you can achieve equity, then diversity and inclusion ends up being a byproduct of that, right? Like, you can't achieve workplace equity without having the diversity and inclusion side. But if you only focus on diversity, you may never achieve equity,
right?
Because it could easily just be, we put a few token people, a few white women on a board, and we're done, right? Yeah. We've seen that happen over the last few years. So when I'm working with companies, what I'm telling them is that, listen, you got to give yourselves permission to fail. And I think that part is hard. Like, it's hard. It's hard for all of us. Even if I'm talking about as a Black woman going into conversations, I have failed in some of those conversations, right? I definitely don't know all the answers. I don't have all the solutions. I don't even have most of them, right? Like, I know a bit, but I'm always in this discovery to try to figure it out, right? So a part of, where how companies can give their leaders as well as their workforce this sense of psychological safety is if you will give yourself permission to fail as a leader, and also give your people permission to fail. Even going into conversations, I've had people ask me like, okay, well, is it like, do I say Black? Do I say African American? Do I see people of color? Like, I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm just going to not say anything at all because I don't know the right terminology.
Right.
And that's hard. And like, I have some sympathy for that. And I also understand that can be challenging, right? Yeah. But if you're in a safe space where you've been given permission to fail, you've given it to yourself as well as the people around you, then you can go into a conversation with the right intent and say, you know what, hey, I didn't know. I said people of color, but you want me to say Black? Cool. I didn't know that, right? And then move on to whatever the solution is. Right. But what happens is, because we have not given ourselves permission to fail, then a lot of times we do nothing, or what happens is we do very limited things that are safe, quote unquote, because the risk seems to be low. And I think it's a lot of companies who have done limited things that are safe because of the low risk.
That is, that is such an excellent point. Like, we need to make sure that everybody goes into these conversations and in any of these discussions and like making sure that it's a safe place, like, and starting from the jump and say, look, we're not all going to say the right things, but we're all coming in with good intent, right? And I think it's, I feel like I'm picking on HR. Maybe in some ways I am a little bit. Like, HR can step up a little bit and say, hey, look, for this conversation, for this area, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, help them create a safe place. You're not going to be persecuted if you say the wrong thing. Like, if we know that, like, that you're truly trying to like work it out. Because there is a true thing is ignorance, people. Like, there's just things that you don't know, right? You're not going to know about something if you've never lived it. I would know nothing about, let me try and think of a country I haven't been to. Ecuador, right? I would know nothing about what it's like to live in Ecuador. Never been there. I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about food. I don't know what the routines are, right? So I would go in truly ignorant, and I would, just like when we're kids and we're toddlers, we're babies. Like that true ignorance, you're going to stumble. You're figuring stuff out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in these conversations, we have to give each other room to do that, right? And I believe that, and I could be wrong, but I believe that you can tell something that's intent and something that's not. Like
Yeah.
it's a way it comes out, right? Like
You can't tell. You can. And I think that's the big thing too. The other thing I always say is your head and your mouth might get it wrong. It probably will. But what matters is does your heart get it right?
right.
Because listen, we're going to say things. I mean, I distinctly remember having one conversation right after George Floyd was murdered with a former client of mine, white guy. And I went in for him. Like the way that I talked to him, it wasn't productive.
Right.
It was, you clearly don't get it and you're part of the problem. And mind you, even if those things were true, it just wasn't productive. It wasn't moving anything forward. And so I know, like, thankfully I had another opportunity to re-engage with him again, but it was just, I failed in that conversation. And so I think there can be failure both from someone who is not black and who says, hey, I really want to be an ally and I want to understand. But there can also be failure from black people who are a lot of times just the raw emotion of all of it. It's not necessarily productive. Like we're not having productive conversations, or maybe we don't know what to ask for. Or maybe in some cases, and hold on, this might be controversial, but we are part of the problem because maybe we are the ones blocking in HR because sometimes HR looks like us. I'm out, David. I can't see. Let me go before I start getting, before somebody comes looking for me. Like, you said what? But it's true.
It is true.
It's
right?
true.
Like there's nobody perfect on either side of this, right?
Yeah.
And I want to so you know, I'm gonna belabor that point, right? So I don't want anybody to get it twisted and think that I feel in any way that you just got to listen to the people of color because they know everything. No, we don't. Like we ain't gonna do everything right. Like people that really know me, that have been close to me, man, y'all know me. Y'all know my mouth. Y'all know my temper. Y'all know how I get. Like, and there's times where I will ride for a cause and come back and be like, that wasn't really the time. Sorry for that, but I did anyway. So I mean, but it just look, it happens. We are human. Every single one of us is human. So we all need that grace, which probably a lot of people don't. Depending on where you're from, right? You might understand that saying, you might not, but we all need that. Well, we all need that grace. And look, there's what was it? Queen and Slim, right? Sometimes your people ain't your people.
It's a fact.
It's
a fact. So I mean, that's for a whole another broadcast, right? That's like a whole another. You have to rename the broadcast and everything.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good idea. I think I'm gonna do a separate broadcast just on that. So for y'all out there, and look, I'm gonna look at y'all. Know who I'm talking about? We're gonna talk about y'all.
Yeah.
Not today, but I'm gonna come
today. But listen, let me know, David. I'll be back for that. Because I have receipt stories and all of that. So
together. So yeah, we're at 250. We're gonna wrap it up, people. So for everybody that's listening who was stalking, being quiet, just not saying nothing, it's cool. I still got love for you, but hopefully you got something out of it. Look, the whole point of this was to have this discussion. Maybe it brought us some things that triggered you, like, man, those are things that I can do, take back in my workplace. Hopefully there's an HR professional or something. I pissed you off and you're like, look, let me tell you all the reasons why you're wrong and what we do every day. Great.
Please let us know. I would love to know the problems. Like, please let me know.
But with that, we just want to, I want to say thanks to Janae again for coming out. I'm going to give her just a couple of minutes here to kind of use this platform, let everybody know about what her company does and what she's got going on.
Oh, aren't you sweet? Because I didn't even come on for that, so I appreciate it. So Janae Johnson, I own Content That Matters. Our tagline is "We Rescue Geniuses," which we do. In this case, what that looks like is we're a human capital consulting firm. And so a lot of the focus has been around change management, leadership development. But right now in 2020, we have literally redirected all of our resources, all of our experience, all of our attention around solving racial inequity in corporate spaces. Because I fundamentally believe that it has to come from using proven methodologies and data-driven decisions. And so some of the same things that we use that are effective when we're looking to get someone to adopt, new technology, right? Like I've done lots of technology implementation projects. Those methodologies are proven, and some of them do work when you're talking about shifting a culture to be more inclusive.
Right.
So we work with leaders around how to do that, and then we also partner with them on the execution. Um, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm probably talking greasy on LinkedIn. I'm about to go record another video to because I personally I'm challenged by the Wells Fargo CEO. I don't know why. Out of everything, I was like, Charlie, I still haven't heard back from you. I also tagged your senior VP for HR. I haven't heard back from him either. So now let me help you kind of figure out where this black talent is, because so I mean there's just so many people that I want to focus on. So my focus for the next week or so, I'll be highlighting some black talent on LinkedIn, just to help them along. So if they're looking for people who are experts, that's what I'll be doing. But I mean, I'm really passionate about this. It's the most personal work I've ever done. And it's not just about me. I have kids. I have a daughter who is on her way to A&T. We think that's her number one choice is North Carolina A&T. But this is about when she goes to work and she enters the workplace in the next 4 to 5 years, that I don't want her to have the exact same experience that I've had working in corporate spaces. I want it to be even just a modicum of difference. And so that's why I'm doing the work that I do. And so if you want to know more, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's how you find me.
There you go. Perfect. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. So again, check out the link, imdavidlee.com/resources. I'll be updating that with more. If you have any questions or just any comments, anything, y'all know how to reach me. You can hit me on Twitter. You can hit me on LinkedIn. Just, don't come for me unless I send you, because, y'all know what it is.
You can redirect them, David, if they come. Redirect them to me if they come for you.
Now, my followers, they know what it is. But for the new people, because we have some new people, just let you know, we're going to always have real conversations. So with that, everybody, enjoy the day. Thank you, Janae. We'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.